Greetings, friends. Welcome to another episode of Dreamscapes. Today we have our friend, author J.V. Hilliard, author of epic fantasy novels and publisher of the alteredrealitymag.com, where you'll find speculative fiction and poetry of the fantasy sci-fi variety. We're going to get right back to him in 2 seconds. Would you kindly please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. Always need more volunteer dreamers. Been doing game streams lately. Hope you guys are enjoying those. Get a t-shirt, coffee mug through the website, BenjaminTheDreamWizard.com, and 15 currently available works of historical dream literature. Also a editor and publisher myself. So that is my housekeeping. Back to our friend J.V. Hilliard out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he's asked me to call him Joe, so we can be on a less formal term. So it's good to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good deal. Yeah. Well, I think we should probably start with what's up with the books. Folks can get them at jvhilliard.com. Links in the description, or all across social media, JV Hilliard Books. So what will they find if they go looking for you?
Yeah, they'll go and they will find the first 2 books of my Warminster series are out. The Last Keeper, book 1, came out last December. Borodin's Lair, which is book 2, launched about 3 weeks ago. And book 3 will be out around the holidays here in 2022. So the series will wrap up sometime in the spring of 23. And they can also find, I write a serial for Altered Reality magazine called The Element of Time, which is set in the same realm of Warminster, just with different characters.
That's very cool. So you're not pulling a what is it, a Robert Jordan or a George R.R. Martin, keeping people 30 years.
No, my publisher believes in the new economy of books, which is really rapid release. And when you're doing epic fantasy and your books are averaging around 500 pages or 140,000 words, there is no rapid release. So every 6 months is pretty quick in that kind of business.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I remember eagerly waiting once a year. Like I was a big Robert Jordan fan, going back to, what was his first book, like 89 or something? And I think I found it mid 90s. And I stopped after 7 or 8 years, but I did this. I reread the entire series to get ready for the next book.
Next one.
Because I get so many characters and plot lines, and I couldn't remember what the hell was going on. Who was this guy? So sometimes it's too much.
I think that's the case in epic fantasy. When you get into those lengthy things, even I've read Tolkien so many times, but it's hard to remember characters unless you are rereading something recently. Or even Martin does it with Game of Thrones. I mean, it's been forever between his books, and it's hard to remember the difference between the HBO show or or what's going on in the books, and so you have to reread them from time to time.
Yep. Well, how would you and you may, comparison is not the right word. How would you compare your works to other works of epic fantasy? But I'm thinking along those lines of like how to describe the world you got it set in, and kind of maybe the basic plot line of some of the Maybe you know what I'm trying to ask better than I do. What do you tell people about your books?
So I would say a few things. I would say first, if you're a fan of Dungeons and Dragons or other role-playing games, I think you'll find that my reads come easier because the books are generated from some of the campaigns I played over the last 20 years of mostly D&D, but other kind of role-playing games as well. And so it's not lit RPG as much as it is epic fantasy and dark fantasy mashed together with 20 plus years of role playing. And so many of the characters and many of the themes have come out of the campaigns and story arcs of playing the game. So I think if there's a differentiation between a Tolkien who just sat down and created a world, I needed to create my own world. So I couldn't use the worlds of Dungeons and Dragons. I couldn't use Middle Earth or Westeros. So So the realm of Warminster is mine. So you're going to find different monsters. I call them cryptids. You're going to find different, but you're also going to find familiarities. Like there are a number of elven creatures in my world that are very similar, except I have vermilion elves that have red hair and red eyes and alabaster skin, or raven elves that have black hair and black eyes, and and therefore the realm owns them. And the concept of building something epic, you've got to think into spell systems, which I think a
Yeah.
lot of that time playing Dungeons and Dragons has helped me with that, as well as monetary systems. And part of my day job is I have a degree in economics, and there's some things there that I've been able to kind of muster together and pull them in, and then make them fantastical and kind of relaunch them into the realm, creating that. And so hopefully, if I were comparing it to something, I would compare it to someone who's developed a realm and a variety of systems around that you don't really get in a standalone book. You might get it in you got to get it in a longer series, which is why I like epic fantasy as a genre.
Yeah, no, me too. That's there are certain things that people look for when they're going to different genres. I mean, if you go to the murder mystery genre, you want a murder and a mystery, and you want the solution of that. You want the puzzle solving of the crime aspect of it. You go to a fantasy or a fantasy world, and you want to know, what are the cultures like? What are the different areas, and how are they unique from each other? What culture clashes are there between different races, elves and dwarves, or gnomes and humans? And most importantly, you got magic in there. How does magic work? So that's why I loved the Robert Jordan conception of it. Well, there's this universal flow that's very yin yang, male female half, and you channel this power through you, and it's got the traditional 5 earth, wind, and fire type of stuff going on with spirit and whatnot. Those explanations are brilliant. I don't know if you want to say how your system works, or if you want to keep it a mystery to people, because that is part of the story, is learning that.
No, I think that would be fine. So, in part, there's a conjurer's tongue. It's a language learned by wizards and sorcerers within the realm that they're able to use to conjure magic, with for themselves. But there's also a magic that comes with, like the veneration of the gods, right? So I've created a pantheon of gods very similar to maybe Greek or Roman, or Nordic, where you're seeing dozens or 2 dozens worth of what I call ancients. And if you pray to them and sacrifice to them in the same way that folks in medieval societies have done, they will imbue upon you the magics that you need. So there's this magic that comes from veneration, and there's also this magic that comes from this mysterious conjurer's tongue.
That very cool. I think it's a very important element. And
Thanks.
No, yeah, and I can see the inspiration without duplication of my own journey as well through the different fantasy systems, specifically D&D, and I've always loved how that worked. I don't know if you, I mean, I haven't played in a long time, but this was back in the late 90s probably. We always gave over the memorization system for more of a spell point system, where we didn't want to be like, I got to wake up in the morning and decide how many healing spells do I need? How many times do I want to transmute mud to rock? But it's like, look, you get 10 spell points because your first level, you can cast, they each cost a different amount. It always reminded me of more of like a video game style, where it uses a chunk of your mana bar and it gets kind of regenerate over time. I was always more of a big fan of that kind of a system in the role-playing genre.
Yeah, and I think you've seen the different editions of Dungeons and Dragons migrate from what was the old way, which is a wizard opens a book and studies it for 4 hours and regains their spells in the morning, to a spell point system that when Wizards of the Coast bought TSR, the idea was, how can we get fans of Magic the Gathering integrated into a role-playing game? And what they did was they used the same kind of concept that you're describing right now, which is, I'm going to use my spell points, and those spell points are going to be, and I can use them to empower a spell. So even though it might be a lesser spell, like a magic missile, to use a Dungeons and Dragons term, you can cast it at a higher level because you're using more of your spell points on it. And so those things have happened. Yeah, like, so and I've seen that from like advanced Dungeons and Dragons back in the 90s all the way through 5th edition today. And I think those things exist. And what I've tried to do was make it, ubiquitous. Anybody, there are folks that can learn it, and there are folks that can pray for it, and there's folks that are born with it. And so that to use another kind of RPG term, it's the difference between a wizard and a sorcerer. A wizard is someone who's going to learn it. There's a scholar, as opposed to someone who is born with this wild magic within them that they can conjure from time to time, but they really don't know how to use it. They almost have to channel it through themselves. Kind of like, Star Wars, uses the Force, or your example with Robert Jordan using, the elements of earth, air, fire, and water, and then sometimes time. Those are things that that they find interesting, and how they can kind of move the needle with their stuff. So that's what makes it a little different in my world.
For sure. Yeah. When you gotta make it distinguish. I mean, I've always wanted to write a book. I've got an idea, and every time I sat down to write it, here's a funny thing you could maybe talk about being an author is what stopped me was the idea, the outline, a lot of the concepts involved are very inspired as far as I'm concerned, in terms of I find them interesting. Go to sit down to write, and it comes out like I get bored with the process. I look at it and I can't tell whether what I've written is good or not, because I'm bored writing it, and I'm thinking someone's going to be bored reading it. But maybe it's just because I know what I'm saying and it's not new to me. I'm not reading it for the first time. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, or if that's a block a lot of writers face, or if I'm describing something.
Well, no. I think you hit the nail on the head. There's a couple of things in there, right? The first is being willing to share your stuff, right? A lot of writers have a tendency to be introverted, and therefore they don't like to open the door and let people in and criticize their stuff.
Yeah,
they think that what they've written. Right. Yeah. What if?
Yeah.
But being a good writer means being open to constructive criticism, and what my publisher has done, or other folks I work with in this business, is they set you up, or you find beta readers, people that you trust, that are not going to be your mom, that are going to tell you, oh, it's so great, honey. And, and meanwhile it stinks. You need someone that can be honest with you about reviewing your stuff, and then telling you what they think, and saying, hey, look, this doesn't work, or there's a plot hole here, or why didn't they do this? Or I missed that. And you fell asleep during, like you brushed over it and you thought it was important, and you found out that you didn't write it well enough. Right. And so it's those bits of constructive. And I tell people, it's just like going to a movie theater and getting, when they're testing a movie, they show 3 different endings, and then the one that's most popular they choose. Or same thing with product placement for marketing and advertising. They have focus groups, and they want to make sure that their product, that is something that jumps out at you and something you'd pick off the shelf, and they're going to want to know. And in my business, that's the cover. You know what I mean? It's not what's in the book. It's with that first glance where you grab the book and look at it, and then you turn it over and read the blurb before you decide to buy it. Right. And it's those 2 acts. How do you summarize an epic fantasy of 500 plus pages with 1 book cover and 150 words on the back? It's hard to do. Right. So, and I think that's what, people, stop people. Right. And I think the other side of it is really, it's really being dedicated to it. If you're going to be a writer, you're going to have to write in some form or fashion every day. And I don't mean
just do it
like 10 chapters a day. What I'm talking about is really a handful of chapters, or 1 paragraph with an outline for the next, or rereading something to make it better, and editing your own stuff. Those kind of things become a bit of muscle memory, and therefore, as you do it, you'll become more confident with it. And then as you share it with people to read, you're going to get their opinions, and hopefully they're honest and constructive, and then you could take that back and really kind of apply it to your work as it is.
Good deal. And so do you tend to write from an outline, or kind of start a chapter and then just see where it takes you?
I am a dungeon master, right? And a dungeon master has to have a plan, right?
So you have the ending in mind, and the contingency.
Yeah, you start with the ending, and you work your way to the beginning, and you find the places in the middle where characters are going to level up. And the same thing happens with the book, right? You have to pace it properly.
Yeah.
And unlike a game where you're breaking it up over a 4-hour period, and you don't see someone for another week or so, this is something that someone could read through if they wanted to. So it has to be paced appropriately. There's no rush in things. You're not going and you meet the enemy right away, and there's this big epic battle. It's got to be paced in the same way you would pace a campaign for Dungeons and Dragons, a group, or for another role-playing game.
For sure. Yeah. And well, that's the other thing you mentioned, I forgot to come back to, is that there's very much as a dungeon master, you're very much a writer of a story. And that's, well, why not preserve these tales you've created? You invested the time and energy to make a story, and now you can kind of repurpose it in a way and say, well, this group of friends like this, I'm going to tweak it here and make it a little better in my own estimation in this way, and repurpose it into something I can share with even more people. That's genius. I kind of wish I thought of that myself.
Well, it's true, though. You just hit the nail on the head. I mean, and you can tell if you've played D&D for any period of time, or any role-playing game, you always know the best campaigns because your friends talk about them years later. Right? They're still remembering when this guy did this, when this character did that, or when we did something soon and it failed. And it's part of a shared delusion among a group, and the stories that always float to the top are going to be the best. They're the ones that are the most entertaining, and so it's easy to build stories around them. And the difference between being a dungeon master and an author is one is storytelling, the other is story writing, right? And it's a matter of taking what you would tell and describe. And as a dungeon master, when you've got the group, you could feel that everybody's
like
connected with you. Yeah, it's like, and that you got them, and that's what you hope for when you're writing a novel.
It's also a great resource too, in terms of like, you've got, in a way, maybe 4 or 5 co-authors, because they're kind of playing their character, and they might throw you a curveball and say, I'm going to do this. Like, I would have never thought of that. That's genius. And I'm going to incorporate it. I can work with it, but you get to be surprised by your audience in a way with that interactive stuff. So
yeah, and that creates good stories. It does. Yeah. And when my friends and family who have played with me over the years, when they've read the book, it's not like written in stone what we did.
Yeah.
To make it better, I had to create things within, and sometimes the characters are the same. Sometimes the situations are adapted to be, fitted into the realm of Warminster, and then other times it's brand new. And so it's some things jump up and surprise them. Other times it's like, I remember when that happened, and that's funny. Put a little Easter egg in there for me.
Oh yeah. That is very cool. Well, something else that was on my mind. So we talked about like your work and in general, but in the broader genre, and this may not be fair and it might be a little controversial. We'll see. But there are some who believe that there is fantasy and sci-fi, but the only real sci-fi is hard sci-fi. Anything with aliens and robots in the future, that's actually fantasy. Do you have an opinion on that? Have you ever thought about it that contextually, or?
Well, I've thought about it in the inverse, right? And I'll give you an example.
Ahead,
yeah. So let me give you this. So you're a fan of fantasy adventure. You've watched the stuff we've talked about. You've read some of that stuff. You've played Dungeons and Dragons. Mm-hmm. When you read Tolkien or when you read Martin, there's no technological advancement ever. Like Isildur was using a sword that was magical, and so was Aragorn, and so was. But they're still riding horses and fighting with swords and shields. And in the case of Jon Snow, he was the 999th guardian on the wall or whatever he was. So that means they've been there for over 2,000 years, and they're still using swords and shields. There's no, and maybe that's a pet peeve of mine where
that's a good point.
I've actually created a city called Abacus, which is the scholar city, which is my version of being able to, like kind of sprinkle in a little bit of sci-fi into my novels that will satisfy fans of both sci-fi and fantasy, saying, oh, I see some technological advancement here. And it's not all magical. It's made by smart people like Q from James Bond, and there's items in there, but some of them are mixed with magic, which makes it more fantasy. And so I've seen it on the opposite side, because for me, I get, the hardcore sci-fi folks don't want to see the aliens and all that other kind of stuff. I get it.
Yeah.
And for fantasy, I'd like to see advancement. So I've built into my novels advancement that, of course, is used by the good guys to overcome the bad guys at the right time and things like that too. But I think that it's different from what I've been reading for my entire life. I think it's not combining the genres. It's like a rock on the pond, where you see one of those advancements in book 1 and one of those advancements in book 2 and another one in book 3, and just enough that it influences the outcome of something, but not enough to make it a sci-fi book. It's truly a fantasy book with a little bit of advancement that you don't see in other places.
That's great. I've never really thought of that from that perspective, is that a lot of these, what we would call sword and sorcery fantasy, epic fantasy genre, is a lot of it's the same. The tropes are the same. The knight on the horseback, the wizard throwing a fireball. I mean, it's hard to, that was probably some of my struggle with this, because I wanted to write, and I may still, and I'm not giving anything away. I haven't talked about it a dozen times in other places, but kind of a sci-fi fantasy crossover where someone from a futuristic, more advanced technology place, boop, back in time to the magic place. And now we get to see, how does an energy shield stand up to dragon fire? Something like that. That's always inspired me. And then I'll have to come up with a system of like my own, which is a stumbling block for me as well. But the idea of, well, if an energy shield has this and then it interacts with and fires this hot, how does that work? Yeah. Anyway, I'm not good with the math, but the way I was trying to, what I was trying to describe initially, and I'm glad it inspired your thought, but the idea that there are people who would say the only real sci-fi is, say, what is it? The guy that did the Terraforming Mars series, like everything, I think this is a good example. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but everything in his book was currently available science, and he just put it in a fictional version of, if we use what we have now and we go to Mars, this is how we would do it. So there's no aliens, there's no advanced technology, there's no energy shield, Star Trek, Star Wars style. And speaking of those too, is that the people who believe in that hard sci-fi is the only sci-fi would actually put Star Trek and Star Wars in fantasy, because it is not real. I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm not sure that I'm hardcore believer in it, but I've always wondered about that theory and what other people think. So getting an author here is right.
Well, you asked me for my opinion, so I'll give it.
Yeah.
I read books for entertainment. I get enough realism in my day-to-day life. I don't need more realism. So if something entertains me, I don't care if it's hard science fiction or it's fantasy science fiction or space opera or gothic horror. It doesn't matter to me. As long as I'm entertained, that's really the goal for me. And if you need to put it in a genre for some, code that someone's going to, need to say what was sold at Barnes and Noble, that's fine too. Because I say fantasy, and it means different things to different people. I've been told my stuff isn't epic because it's not 650 pages or longer. I've been told that.
By epic? Is that the only way to look at it?
I didn't know there was a hard definition of it. It's like, well, geez, I've got 4 books that are each over 500, pages, and I've got family trees and maps of the realm and histories of people you're never going to meet because they're already dead. And that's not epic enough. Because what's the difference between classical fantasy and high fantasy meets epic fantasy meets dark fantasy meets sword and sorcery meets young adult sorcery, and now there's a new adult, which is someone who's like 18 who isn't in YA anymore. That's the new category. It's new adult, and it's like it's too nuanced. If a book is good, it's good, and I don't care what genre it's in. I'm going to read it.
Yeah, there are just so many genres, and you have to think, well, does a category have utility? Is it going to tell me something I need to know? And that's probably a better way to look at it, outside of, as you say, Barnes & Noble marketing statistics. Like, does this group of people want to buy a sci-fi book or a mystery book or a fantasy book? But yeah, kind of, then the way you described it too, the idea of, high fantasy, dark fantasy, epic fantasy. What means epic? I'd say epic is the scope of it. In my estimation, not the length. I would say to my imagination, epic always meant it was a big world with it was like more of a living world instead of like a more contained slice of something. It was the scope, the scale of it that made it epic in my mind.
Yeah.
But I guess there's a lot of different ways to, I don't know if there's standard definitions of those things.
It's funny, they marked me down on my review because they didn't think it was epic enough. And meanwhile, it's like, all right, well, I don't know. What do you want me to do? Like, I've got, family histories. I've got a map that has areas that are haven't been explored yet. I've got, future novels that are coming out. I've got a monetary system. I've got a magic system, and it is what it is. I mean, I think some people like to put a category around everything so they can label it. But if I'm going into a store, I'm looking for fantasy sci-fi, whether it's hard sci-fi or fantasy sci-fi. I'm going to the same several spots in the store or the same place on Amazon or whatever. So it's all right.
Well, and I'm the same way, and it's definitely my love of the broader sci-fi fantasy genre that has, given me the DreamWizard title. It's like I had to call myself something like, well, what does I do? What is it that I do? And what do I want to tell people about it? And I could have just been, hi, I'm Ben, the dream guy, I guess, but it just didn't have a ring to it. And I thought, well, I've always looked up to the archetype of the wizard, the learned, understands arcane things, and it can almost see the future and speaks magic words. And some of these, all this stuff kind of fell together. So I don't believe I have magic powers. I don't think I talk to God. I'm not receiving messages from spirits to people. I'm not doing anything supernatural, but I'm aspiring to that archetype. I'm trying to embody it in what I do, tell people things that are useful, speak those magic words to them, understand cause and effect and how it relates to things. And Now that's one side of it. The other side is what I lovingly call the spooky woo side, which is where the hell do my ideas come from? How do I get these associations? I might as well be praying to the muses. Maybe I just
Yeah.
worship in the right way in my lifestyle, and that's opened me up to something where, and I like that metaphysical take on it as well. The idea that what makes me able to do what I do is because I open myself to it. I say, I want to be of benefit. I want to provide something useful, helpful to the person. I want that connection. I want good answers that make sense. And just that proper focus is almost like like in your magic systems, you're saying there's people who are born with it, people who train to learn the tongue. I'm trying to do both. I think I was born with this natural, high functioning, autistic, abstract thinking association thing going on. But then I went and I trained in psychology. I spent 20 years in the field. And really, I got down to going, oh, these things fit together. I could do this. And then I started a YouTube channel. So that's
Then it works, right?
yeah, that's my
Yeah.
thing on the whole, like being a wizard. Like, am I?
Yeah, you created
Yeah,
the magic potion then.
right? Yeah, not really, but yes, a little bit of both. So, well,
Exactly right.
speaking of the dream thing, you feel like you wanted to jump into it?
Yeah, I'm happy to when you're ready.
Okay, yeah. Let me just make a little note of the time here. I finally got smart and started putting timestamps on my notes. So I go, when did we start talking about that? Because my
No
memory is
problem.
awful. So as per my usual process, I just shut up and listen. Our friend Joe's gonna tell us about his dream, and then we're gonna go back through it, and then we're gonna put something together that makes sense between the two of us. From when we were talking beforehand, you said it is part of a larger series of dreams. You called it continuing dreams. And this was fascinating too. I did want to mention this on air for folks who are listening. So there's recurring dreams, which are almost the same formula. It's as anyone who's listened before will hear, there was a woman who was telling us that her dream was she's always crawling through like ductwork in a house and reaching a place that's a room that could only be reached through this very strange path. And those dreams, the details change, but the pattern stays the same, this crawling through a tight space to get to a secret room. Now that's more on the recurring dream side, but side of things. But what you're describing is, and the first time I ran across that was talking to another guy who does interviews with folks and just gets their life story. He said he was having continuing dreams of the same character or characters. His imaginary brother doesn't exist in real life, and just every night a different dream featuring these same people. So that was kind of your experience as well.
Yeah, so I'm glad someone else categorized it as a continuing dream because that's exactly what I had, and I used it for the basis of the main conflict between my characters in my novels, which I'll get to in a second.
Yeah. Benjamin the Dream Wizard wants to help you pierce the veil of night and shine the light of understanding upon the mystery of dreams. Every episode of his Dreamscapes program features real dreamers gifted with rare insight into their nocturnal visions. New Dreamscapes episodes appear every week on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and other video hosting platforms, as well as free audiobooks highlighting the psychological principles which inform our dream experience and much, much more. To join the wizard as a guest, reach out across more than a dozen social media platforms and through the contact page at benjaminthedreamwizard.com, where you will also find the wizard's growing catalog of historical dream literature available on Amazon, featuring the wisdom and wonder of exploration into the world of dreams over the past 2,000 years. That's Benjamin the Dream Wizard on YouTube and at benjaminthedreamwizard.com.
They began when I was about 16 years old, and I started having the first nightmare I had was the one that was the most stirring. I woke up, I was outside, it was cold, it was damp, I was walking through fog, and then I came to the edge of water, and I could feel the water and the mud in my toes, and the fog melted away, and on top of this water was walking a man, literally walking on water, but he was wearing a suit and a tie. His hair was slicked back, and he approached me and told me that that he was my guardian angel, and that he was going to help me, and that I needed to listen to the things he told me to do. And I'm telling you, what I'm saying now isn't very scary, But in my dream, my heart's racing, my mind's racing. All I wanted to do was run. I was scared because I didn't know where I was. I had wandered through this bank of fog. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know how to get away from him. And then you get confronted with this godlike creature that's walking on water, that's dressed like a business person, and someone that at the age of 16 you would be respectful of because they're not one of your friends. And for them to present themselves in a way that was almost matter of fact, telling me that this is what they were going to do for me. And then that led to other dreams where he was featured in them. And some of them were good and some of them were really bad. And they affected things that were going on around me, and it was very temporal. They were very, relevant to things that were going on at my life at those times. And then they abruptly stopped when I got to about 23, 24. And I think it's because I didn't listen. I chose not to listen to him, and he eventually went away. So I think that that first dream was almost like walking through a door, and then I didn't know how to get back through it. And then every now and then it would recur, and I had no control over it, except every time there was a logical continuance of it. And if you want me to get into some of that, I can, or if you want me to stop and let you kind of chat about that too, I'll let you, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, well, I was taking notes while you were describing that very first dream. Is that the one you wanted to focus on? Because we can.
Yeah.
And then
Yes.
I'm glad you remember, because there's a lot of folks who come in and they go, I've been having these dreams for 20 years. I don't remember the first one. But the last one I had 3 months ago, let me tell you.
No. The first one I will never, ever forget.
That is a great narrative. It doesn't have to be very long. It'll be very short. You've got your main character is right into action, as they say, right?
Well, it wasn't supposed to be. It's me, unfortunately, right?
Well, for sure, yeah. And often in our dreams, well, I can't say often. A lot of dreams are different, but there's genres in a way. There's categories. So there's looking out your own eyes as yourself, looking out your own eyes as someone else, looking at yourself in third person, looking at someone else in third person, almost like first person versus third person video game styles of observing ourselves and the situation. And sometimes people float in and out of it. They're like, I'm looking at the guy, then I'm looking at me, looking at him from behind the guy. And that change in perspective can mean something as well. But that is plenty to work with. Dreams. I mean, I've had dreams told to me. What was it? The very last episode, if anyone heard it, the gal, her entire dream was, I was falling through a void. I decided I didn't want to fall anymore and that I wanted to return to the world. That was the whole dream, like 3-line description. And we got an hour-long episode out of it. So no, for sure. There's so much meaning in these things that, that's why people come to the wizard to try and pull that meaning out. Okay.
Well, I'm here, Mr. Wizard.
Right? Let's do it. Let's do the thing. So you were about 16 at the time. It's good to know the time frame. You got about a 7-8 year period where they were coming and going. The first thing you remember was waking up in outside in a damp fog. So when you say waking up, is that kind of just a metaphor for becoming aware of where you were?
That's right. I knew at that point that I was sleeping. I was dreaming. I knew I was in my own dream. It was a first person. I was looking through my own eyes. And at that point, I knew that I was not in my bed, but I didn't know where I was. It was almost like waking up from a sleepwalk.
Okay. This is blending all kinds of interest. You've got a kind of lucid dreaming element to it almost, where you're kind of...
it's the most lucid dreams. I dream nothing like this regularly, but these dreams are outrageously lucid. And that's why they're so scary. We're outrageously lucid.
Yeah. There's things that I'm better at and worse at, and lucid dreams is one of them. I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around that stuff. So we're going to work with this. We're going to do what we can.
Right.
But it's very interesting. So there, broad strokes dream theory, from what I've been able to gather from my research and 15 books of historical dream literature that I've edited, did not write. I'm more of an accomplished editor than writer. I'm getting around to writing my own.
All right.
Someday when I'm ready. Broad strokes, seems to be, as I put it, the heart beats, the lungs breathe, the brain thinks. it really never stops. It just does what it does, whether we're asleep or awake. So brain's still thinking while we're asleep. We call it subconscious because we're not awake and aware. There's a theory that we dream constantly the entire night. It's just dreams are electrical activity of the brain, thinking our own thoughts while we're asleep. The dreams we remember seem to be the ones that occur near what some authors have called the borderland state between being asleep and being awake. It's got to be close enough to the conscious awareness that we can see it and remember it. Otherwise, it's just lost to the subconscious. Doesn't mean it never happened. We just never became aware of it consciously. So there's that element to it. And what seems to happen is that because you're approaching awareness, if you're still sufficiently asleep, you have kind of involuntary experiences. But almost if you get a little bit closer to being awake, you become aware, I'm asleep, and lucid dreams seem to happen. So it's in that borderland state between sleeping and awaking that we can remember, recognize, and even then become lucid. How to cause that to happen, how to understand it, what to do with dreams that are part involuntary, part voluntary, I'm not sure. But there's also, and this is we'll throw you for a loop, there's also a little twist where it's possible we dream that we're aware that we're dreaming. So we're not actually aware that we're dreaming, but we have the dream experience that we think we're aware that we're dreaming. And what's the difference? I don't know. Is there a difference? Maybe not. But and it's hard to tell. And I haven't wrapped my brain around it yet. Maybe another 100 interviews or 500. I'll get there, right? I'm planning on doing this. Oh, let's see, 45 now. If I make it, I could probably do this for another 30 years, get 50 episodes a year. I don't know. I can't math. But I'll do it that long if I can. Okay. All of this just because you're describing your experience, and that's all we're going to get out of this. What did you see? What did you hear? What did you feel? What did you know? And knowing is the same as seeing. You see an object, you know what it is, same difference. So you became aware you were in a dream, and because you're like, well, I'm not in bed. I should be in bed, but I'm somewhere else. And there was this almost kind of feeling of waking up in another place. And that's a good experiential description is the way I'd put it, is like often the first thing we remember in the dream is like awakening. It's like the first thing you remember in the morning. I remember rolling over and I realized I was awake. It's the first thing you can remember. Did other things happen before that? Probably. But it's not you can't remember what you don't remember. I'm rambling, but that's, so that's also a very common experience. Yeah. And you became aware that you were in a damp fog. You were looking, I'm going to put just FPS here, first person shooter perspective, looking out your own eyes. Did you have an awareness of yourself? Like, were you in your bed clothes? Were you naked? Were you, wearing running shoes and a tracksuit?
The only thing I noticed is I wasn't wearing shoes because I could feel the mud between my toes and it was cold. Okay. So I felt cold. Yeah. And that's how I know. And then there was this tug that was like pulling me into the fog, and that's how it happened.
Gotcha. So just to be clear for my own sake, as you're in that moment of, oh, I'm not in bed, I'm here somewhere else, you already realized I'm barefoot and I can feel cold mud underneath my feet. Yeah. At that point, even before you reach the riverbank?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Cold mud. Squishy. Did it feel slippery, hard to walk on? Did you fight for balance, or just the sensation more than...
It was the sensation of being cold and involuntary.
And then that involuntary pull towards the riverbank.
Yeah, like I didn't want to be there. I don't know how I got there, and I was going to walk through this fog no matter what was going to happen.
Gotcha. And you said that was kind of a disturbing feeling to you, like you weren't happy to be there at that moment?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's unsettling. There's no way I wanted to be there. And, the irony is if someone tells you you're a guardian angel and I'm going to come and help you, that they wouldn't pull you into a scene like that, right?
You would think it would, even if it looked foul, it might feel fair, to quote Tolkien, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
so your uh, immediate awareness is the cold mud. I'm not where I'm not in bed anymore. I'm somewhere else. And you describe a kind of a thick, dense fog, like you can't really see any other parts of the landscape.
No, I can't see anything because of the fog
Okay.
until I get to the lake.
And I kept saying riverbank, and I'm sorry, lake. Yeah. See,
Yeah,
landscape.
it was placid. I mean, almost like a sheet of like a mirror. You know, and that's how I knew it was a lake. It wasn't running. You know what I mean? And you kind of
Gotcha. Yeah,
walk
yeah,
down
yeah.
toward it like you're fishing, and you walk and you just feel that mud at your feet, whether you're wearing boots or not.
Oh yeah.
You know, it was that kind of thing. And then the fog melted away as soon as I got to the lake.
Well, I want to take this off here and put this on here. There we go. I use these pads down to the last one, but then sometimes I'm like, I've got 2 sheets left. I can't do anything with that. I need a new pen.
Oh, good. Yeah, no
Right?
worries.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to keep us in that moment. So you said you felt a tug or a pull or a compulsion. How would you really kind of describe this feeling of?
So it's like you know how you go up high on a roller coaster and you know you're going to go over the top. It was that kind of feeling, and it was like that. I knew that I was going to go through this fog and something was going to happen, but I didn't want to, and it was taking me there anyway.
Okay. So did you experience yourself walking, or did you actually kind of actually just get pulled almost like floating across the ground style?
It was too long ago. I don't remember. I feel like I was pulled, but I can't
Oh,
say for sure.
okay. That's fair enough. I might rattle some doorknobs and they don't come open. At the never felt. You don't have to apologize.
Yeah, no problem.
Pulled, but that's yeah. I like to dig around in these things a little bit more too, because sometimes it was like, yeah, I felt compelled to move, and so I did. I walked because I asked that. Then we're able to shed some nuance on it. But this is fine, and it could have been a floating motion, but there was a pull. It was like this is something happening to you. This is involuntary. You didn't say, "I'm going to see what's over there," and you had that conscious thought, and you followed through on
I
it.
would have never, ever, ever done that in this dream.
Yeah,
Ever.
fair
I
enough.
wanted to go home. I wanted
Yeah.
to go home.
What do we got here? So, what was your experience of the relative time or distance it took to go from where you appeared to being at the bank? Was it like a couple of steps, just really close, or?
No, that was the problem. I don't know how long. I felt like it was forever, but it didn't like it but it opened up like it wasn't forever, right? Like in my head it felt like I was walking for a long time, but in the dream unraveled in in quick time. And so I was
Okay.
at the bank of the lake. Um, you know, it just happened, and I was there, as opposed to it like I wasn't looking at a clock or anything, but it just felt like it was longer to get there. Like
Yeah.
I was farther away from being safe the farther I went into the fog. Right.
Okay. That's a good detail too. Moving toward the lake, a decrease in the feeling of safety. Very interesting. And I like to ask that too, because it could have been like I took one step and realized, whoa, that's water. No, this was like there was a time, a perception of time, indeterminate but long, not brief. The opposite of sometimes we go by opposites in that sense of description. Like how long? I don't know, but it wasn't short. Um, when you got there, now that you're kind of putting yourself back into that moment and experiencing this again, you definitely described seeing water. You knew it was a lake. You knew it was kind of placid, so that would mean not a river. Any features of the bank? There's rocks, there's grass, there's reeds, there's jumping fish.
It was just mud at my feet. I knew I was at the end because the water was there, and then fog was behind me and around me. So the only thing I could see was the fog and the lake in the beginning.
And so
You
the
know,
fog.
until he walked across it.
Gotcha. So how far out of the lake do you think you could see? Was it the same? Like imagine you were in a fog bubble and it was traveling with you. Did it suddenly expand when you hit the lake, or
It
stayed
opened
above?
up in front of me and stayed here, so I could only see the lake in front of me. Right, like this is the only place I was looking forward the whole time.
And could you see how big the lake was and what was on the other side, or just after a certain distance fog?
It was after a certain distance fog, and then I heard him walking across the water.
And he kind of emerged out of the fog, slowly took shape. Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's a sound of footsteps on the water. And so now you're back in that moment, and you don't step into the water. You stay on the bank.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And what was going through your mind when you heard those footsteps? Did anything occur?
I was frightened. You know what I mean? It was fear, and I just wanted to run. But I also needed to find out what was coming at. I didn't have much of a choice, but I knew I was going to see something I didn't want to see, but I wanted to run.
Okay. And then he emerges from the fog, and what's you described him as he's in a business suit and kind of slicked back hair. Any other features, colors?
Yeah, I would say he's a white, middle-aged white guy, right? I don't remember him being ugly or handsome. I don't remember him being brutish or strong or thin. It was just a guy, and he was in a suit, standing on the water. He stopped next to me. He walked all the way to me, but stayed on the water. And then his suit was dark. It was dark out. I don't know if it was blue or black, but it wasn't anything except for those two colors.
Okay.
And that's when he started to speak to me.
Hair color? Did you say it was dark hair as well, or blonde? Or
I would say dark because it was wet. In my head, it looked wet.
So you definitely had that slick back thing, which means greased or styled or something, or wet. Yeah, maybe emerged out of the water. Who knows?
I don't know. I just know that it was slick back. So I would say it was dark because everything was dark.
Sure. Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of these things are like, maybe we get nothing out of it, but maybe it inspires something. I mean, suddenly you realize there was something in his breast pocket when you start thinking about the suit. Nothing like that jumped to your mind. Nothing about his shoes, or was he also barefoot?
Yeah. No, he was walking on the water. And that was the thing for me. He was sort of generic, if that makes sense. There wasn't any features about it. I will never forget his face, but I don't, unless I was some sort of like police, sketch artist. Yeah. I don't know how to describe it any other way. It kind of, I saw his face in multiple dreams moving forward for that period of time. So I won't forget it. I've never seen anybody have it. I don't know. It wasn't like someone I knew from my life cast into my dream. It was more this figure, this quote unquote guardian angel that had come to help me in the scariest of ways. So,
yeah,
you try to take in as much as you can, but I was more shocked at the fact that he was standing on water and not he didn't come, he didn't shake my hand. He just started talking to me. Like I said, it was matter of fact. It was like, hey, I'm your guardian angel. I'm here to help you. I need you to do things I tell you to do. It was almost like, not ordering, but it was matter of fact. Like this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's how I left it.
In terms of his face, when you first saw him, demeanor wise, expression, anything, was he smiling and friendly? Was he very cold and distant? Expression?
It was stoic is the way I would describe it. Almost nonchalant.
Business-like in that way, he was there to get a job done, and
maybe that's a good point. I don't know. I never thought of it that way. It was almost as if he was, you go somewhere and someone tells you, you go for direction somewhere, and they just look at you and point, and then they're done with you, right? And it was almost like he was like, "This is my job. I'm here to tell you that I'm here to help you, and you need to do this stuff, and I'll come back and see you," right? And that's how it started.
Okay, so you didn't get a sense of benevolent warmth, like he cared that you were going to follow through and that he wanted to make you feel comfortable.
Not until later dreams. There was plenty of passion in later dreams. not in this one. This one was about as robotic as it could be.
Okay. So not a lot of stoic, not a lot of emotional expression. Fair enough. But also, you didn't get a vibe of this person hates me or was here to do anything malicious to me. You didn't feel warmth or coldness of a malicious type either.
Not at that point.
Very
The
very neutral on
surrounding,
that one. Yeah.
yeah, the surroundings and the scenario was more scary than he was.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, like once I saw him, it wasn't about it wasn't about anything that was around me anymore except for him. And then when he left, that's when everything. I went back to my bed, right? So like it's yeah, the scariness went away when he started speaking,
Okay.
and that's kind of what it is. I mean, that's the best way I would describe it.
It's very interesting there too. And so there was a lot of this tension built up around that's tension, fear, anxiety, fear the unknown in a way, but I'm throwing out words. But all the way up to this, there was like, almost like an escalation, not an escalation, can't say that, but an intensity to this discomfort of the discovery process and the introduction. But then actually that went away when he started speaking. That's a very
Yeah,
that's an interesting moment that we probably want to come back to or focus on in some way of like there was something about having the unknown quality clearly defined. Okay, this is what I'm here to do. There's like a moment of what is it? It's like flicking on a light switch. I'm scared of the dark. The room is dark. I can't see anything. You put the light switch on and go, oh, now I see there's nothing here. Now I see there's
right.
nothing
It was like
nothing to be
almost the
afraid
fear of the
of.
unknown
Yeah.
until the unknown presented itself, and now it was at least partially known.
Yeah, what is it? What
Although
is
it was,
one of my favorite lines from Into the Woods, a play from like the '90s or something like that? Bernadette Peters, I think, was in it in the original stage
yeah,
production. But one of the narrators also jumps in as one of the fathers is missing. He's like, "When first I appear, I seem mysterious, but once explained, I'm nothing serious." I love that. I love
yeah.
that line. That's always stuck with me. But me that can't remember shit, but that line I've got it memorized. um, so it's good that, and that's probably significant too. Again, we don't have to package it just that way yet, but to throw that idea out there. Um, and as much as possible, can you? I know you have the gist of what he said. Do you remember like exact words or the flow of any conversation or the order in which he said specific things? What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, he said in almost verbatim because I have this. I remember most of what he said verbatim
Hmm.
to this day. He said, I am your guardian angel. I am here to help you. You need to do what I tell you to do." And then in other dreams, he would tell me to do stuff.
And just at the tail end of it, it was you need to do what I tell you or tell you to do.
Tell you to do.
Okay. Do you remember anything about the quality of his voice? High pitched, bassy.
No, it was again maybe it was the nonchalance in which he presented himself, but it was what's the word I'm looking for? The author that's looking for a word. Imagine that.
I know, I know
Yeah,
that
yeah,
feeling.
it was steady and it was scary at the same time. Like um, there was dual meaning behind his words, right? And I think that's what scared me the most about it because there was a duality here that existed. Like, if you were here to help me, why are you scaring me? If you're here to help me, why are you telling me what to do? And why there's almost like the lack of free will with it, and it was orderly. It was almost as if like a lieutenant was giving a private an order, right? Like, private, I need you to do these things, and then dismissed. That
Yeah.
kind of it was that kind of tone. Less, there was no friendliness in it. There was nothing like threatening in it, but it was sure scary. And I don't know if that was just me or some effect from being, that was imparted. I honestly don't know. I just took it as steady and orderly.
Fair enough. And I'm trying to think of how to ask words about how people talk, how to ask for words describing how people talk. And you're orderly, steady. You're giving me great stuff. Trying to hear it myself, and it might be my problem with, the Aspie thing legit gives me the associative powers, but then there's like facial expressions, tones of voice. I don't always pick up on that stuff. So I almost have to kind of, okay, was this? Were they trying to say that? Okay, those were the words they used, but their tone suggested they might be sarcastic, but I can't be sure. Fuck. It's like I get all twisted up in that stuff sometimes. Deadpan humor. That gets me too. I'm like, they said it like they were serious, but that sounds absurd. Are they serious? Are they delusional? Wait a minute. So, but I think that's a very important thing to again, that's where I'm getting stuck into this dual meaning thing of like, there's something, as you were saying, it's like, if you're here to help, why am I scared? And that's a good question to ask. And that might be, if you were thinking that during the dream, that might be, because sometimes in life there are things where it's like, this is good for me, but I'm going to get pushed outside my comfort zone type of scary, where it's like, or going to the dentist. I'm terrified of needles, and okay, I got a cavity and the tooth's going to rot and fall out, but so I need to go do something I don't want to do. I got to get stabbed in the mouth with a fucking needle and let him take care of my teeth. Oh, I hate it. And that's one of those like, I don't want to do it, but it's good for me. Fuck. So, when this, what am I trying to say? Did he just deliver that brief speech, a couple of lines, and it concluded? Did he wait for a response? Did you say anything?
No, that's what I meant. It was almost like a military marching order, and then he walked away, disappeared on the lake, and then I reappeared in my bed. I woke up, I was terrified.
Okay.
And at 16 years old, you're beyond that point where dreams should terrify you. Yeah. But every time he appeared, I was terrified.
Well, one of the things, okay, so we're at the end of the dream. We've gone back through it a second time. Now we're going to use my notes to try and go through it almost a third time, but start picking out those things that might make some sense to us and give some things. What was running around my brain is there's a pop culture understanding of angels in a way, which is like benevolent creatures of light. They're, carrying here to enact God's will in a way that is beneficial to man. There's that pop culture understanding of angels being the good guys. But if you look biblically, God sent angels to smite entire cities. They were there to do a job, and they would throw down and raise, with a flaming sword. And a lot of people say biblically describe folks, and he's going to lay right on the notes. He sure is. As long as he's not laying on the keyboard, we're good. I'll just
he just wants some attention from Dad. That's all he wants.
And there's actually a lot of descriptions of people being visited by angels, and they were terrified because this is a extremely powerful representative of the almighty supreme being come to interact with me. Was Mary when she got visited and with immaculately concepted with Jesus. She was scared to death. This thing, the voice of the creatures that speak for God. Also, all this stuff is going through my head when I'm thinking about this. And this creature announced itself to you as your guardian angel. So the first thing I thought was, I would probably be terrified too. This is a extremely powerful supernatural being. But these are all the thoughts going through my head. I don't know if you have a religious background at all. Are you broadly Christian or
non-practicing Catholic? You know what I mean? Like I was brought up Catholic, but my last real episode, it's now like Christmas and Easter, weddings and funerals, right? And then, when everybody asked me, I would say, if you ask me what religion, I would say I'm Roman Catholic. So there's, I can get where there's some of that, especially the symbolism of that in there, although none of that screams Catholic, like sacrament, a guy in a suit on but I guess the walking on the water thing, thanks to, maybe
I
that's a
also
little bit
thought
in there.
it, well, Jesus, but I wasn't going to
Yeah.
push that as a necessary answer. But it's definitely
Well, it
part of
didn't
part
feel
of the
like that.
mythology. Yeah, didn't
It
feel
did
like
not feel
Jesus.
like that. Yeah, and there was nothing like when you hear the term, I don't know, like when you hear the term guardian angel, you think of someone who's there to comfort and to guard, right? Is going to be your shield in battle, or will be there to help you through hard times. And this was not that. This was I am telling you who I am, and I'll see you next time. And then other things happen. I know we're not getting into those, but it was so matter of fact. It was like a drill sergeant coming up to you and just telling you that, and then disappearing.
Yeah. Um, the cat was over my notes, so I couldn't review.
Sorry.
No, cool. So, how about when you were 16 when this dream first came to you? Were you having second thoughts or doubts about your faith, or were you coming to realize, hey, maybe this really isn't for me, or were you more into it at the time and very invested, and that faded away over the years?
Yeah, I think that my faith, I don't know, like it started to go away when I went into high school. Where like science meets religion, and sometimes things don't often. I mean, there was a faith there and I had seen enough stuff in my lifetime that would question why any kind of God that I was learning about would do the things that they would do, and so I was already away from that at that point. And like I mentioned earlier, I was playing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, and
Yeah.
watching kind of crazy movies. So in my head, in the beginning, I was thinking, this is just some leftover, something bubbling in my head when I'm going to sleep, as opposed to something that was serious until it got serious later.
Yeah, well, that's another way to look at this. I'm struggling with the nature of it because of multiple factors. We got the kind of quasi lucid, we got the continuation dreams, which are still working to understand that. But then we've got a lot of the symbolic side of stuff. So what I try to do is nail down what do each of these elements mean to people as we go along. I mean, there's iconic things about being in a fog. There's a very limited vision, and it's what am I trying to say? The idea of, if you want to ratchet up the tension or the fear of, make it so someone can't see, blindfold them, or restrict their ability to accurately perceive what's going on around them. So there's not that was being done to you in a way, in that sense, but your mind may be representing. Imagining you're in a scenario where you can't get the lay of the land. You can't really understand what's going on around you. You don't know where you are or why. You're completely out of your element. You're out of bed. You're not where you think you're supposed to be. You don't know how you got there. And you've been saying things about, like, this felt very much out of control, like it was pulled into this. So there, when I start kind of conceptualizing that, is there anything at that time in your life where you felt like you were thrust into a situation you couldn't get an understanding of and didn't know
Well, I
where
mean,
to?
it's 16, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So I'm sure there was lots of that. You have a college decision pending. There was girls. There was, important tests you needed to do to get into college, and things like that. But I was never the worrying type. Like I'm not. I don't have that kind of anxiety. I always knew that I was going to do well academically. I always knew that I was confident, and that's what I mean. It's so hard to describe this because it's antithetical, right? Like I when you're 16 and a guy and you have all of this energy and hormones, and the world can't beat you down, and then you see this thing and it's humbling in
mm-hmm.
a way where, like, you have no control. And it was like I was almost summoned. It's the way I feel. It was almost
Yeah,
like I was pulled out of my bed, out of a comfort zone, forced to kind of live into this bubble of fear as I got there, and then told that I was going to be visited by a creature that I didn't trust. Right? There was nothing about him that was trustworthy, except that I knew I was going to see him again. Like, there was no way I was not going to see this guy again,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I saw him again and again and again. in different scenarios, asking me to do different things. And, in the departure of it left me feeling like I had no control over what had just happened. But I don't think I was out of control. Like I wasn't the getting picked up by the police. I wasn't an out of control teenager. I
Yeah.
was a very egotistical, I know better, I'm 16, of course I know everything kind of thing, and look at what I can do, finding your way in life. But it was an uplifting, like I was feeling good about who I was at the time and who I was planning on becoming. And then this thing just kind of in my dreams, it derails. It took that power away from me entirely.
Yeah.
It's humbling is the right way to put it, I think.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there's a couple ways to go with this. So there's what I do is specifically the symbolic association. These are your own thoughts. Maybe this thing is a part of you and it's speaking to you from a place that you haven't acknowledged, and it's telling you, look, you're gonna have to confront me and what this is one side. Or you got visited by a guardian angel, and that's the spooky woo side of things. I don't know what to do with that. What do you believe on it now? Looking back, does this thing felt like it was really supernatural, or where do you want to go with it?
Well, if I can tell you more about
Let's
other dreams, it might help. So
how did kind of the relationship progress? What did it ask you to do? Yeah.
So simple things in the beginning. There was, the first thing it asked me to do was to call a phone number. That was I had a local area code phone number and said, your future lies with this phone number. But I was too scared to call it. To this day, I haven't told anybody what the number is. I haven't ever called it, and I just won't ever call it because I'm getting the weird. Yeah. So it's weird to even think about that. And then when I didn't call it, he came to me and beat me up in a dream. And in this dream, I was not out. The second dream, he pulled me back out to the lake. In the third dream, he came out of my closet in my room. My brother's bed was gone, and he just kicked the shit out of me. He's yelling at me. Why didn't I listen to him? I needed to listen to him, threatening. And the next day, I was out, on the school bus in class. I wasn't paying attention. It was that's all I could think about while I was there. Yeah. And then it stopped for a while, and I ended up going to college, and he returned to me in college and said, basically, it was like a mea culpa. Like I shouldn't have done what I did. And, I'm going to show you that I'm going to do something nice for you, sort of like as a favor to make it up to you. And the next day I got 101% on a physics test, that I hadn't studied for, to be honest with you. Wow. And it's one of those things where it was like, all right, was that him, or am I making this up in my head? Am I trying to find something good that happened to me? And then he started asking me to visit a cemetery where there was and I didn't know it at the time, but he asked me to visit a cemetery that I had walked through many times as a kid, and asked me to go to a specific grave and pray above it. And I didn't think that the grave existed, and I went there in real life and found it. You know what I mean? And I don't know if that's because I saw it on my walks. There was a baseball field that I had to walk through the cemetery to get to a baseball field, and it would save me, 5 minutes worth of walking, and it wasn't that far from my house. And I don't know why, because this person had no relation to me whatsoever. They had been buried in 1906. And then he asked me again to make that phone call, and I refused to do it. And then the dreams went away. They stopped happening, forever. I haven't had one since, and I don't, but every dream, even when it was good, I'm still right here, I'm shaking just talking about it.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's this nervous energy, I'm going to conjure him back. I hope I don't have this shit tonight.
Yeah. I hope talking about it doesn't bring it back. If it's an unpleasant experience.
And it was eight years, and it was every 3 months, every 4 months, the longest period in between those every 6 months. But the dream picked up exactly where the last one left off. I knew where I was in the story of the dream. It wasn't like I had to restart and live it all again. It was I went to that lake, and then I went to the lake the second time because that's when he asked me to make the phone call. And then the next time he just came into my room, and I knew that it was bad. I didn't see him yet, and I could feel him. And when he came out of my closet, I knew something bad was going to happen. And then that's when he attacked me and was screaming at me for not following his orders. And then he went away as almost punishment. And then he came back when I was in college. And then it enticing me. Like, hey, maybe, instead of vinegar, here, this is what, we'll try this way.
Yeah.
And then at the end, I did walk through the cemetery because that was something that I could do with no one else knowing. And I found the grave, and I didn't pray over it. I just was freaked out about it. I went home, and then that was he asked me one last time at the lake to call the number, and I just don't have the courage to call it. And I have, asshole buddies have been asking me for years, give me the number, man, I'll call it. And there's I don't want that. It's almost like I just don't want any of that. And so
yeah.
It's scared me to death every time. Even when it was a good dream, it was a bad dream. So
Gotcha.
I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. Yeah. Absolutely. And this is one of the strangest experiences I've heard of from people. Most of the folks who reach out to me, they've got, like I said, a specific dream. We try and reach into it and see what's there. This feels like something else. And it very well could be purely psychological. We might be able to get something out of it from that angle, but I don't know if I want to push that or not. I'm not sure. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. That's what I'm saying. This is, I like things that challenge me like this, that are outside of my wheelhouse, that say, well, what do you do with this? How do you make sense of this? I did have
I don't know what to do.
Right. I did have questions in terms of like when he was beating you up. Did he say anything specific in terms of why he was angry, or just angry because disobedience?
He was angry because I hadn't called the number, and he wanted to know why I didn't call the number. And I didn't say it, but I almost imparted that I was scared to call it, and he was yelling at me for not listening to him. It was like he was punishing me by beating me up, throwing me through a table, flipping me over his back because I hadn't done what he told me to do. And but it wasn't like, I'm worried about you, you need to do it. It was like, I told you to do this, why didn't you do it? I'm going to kick the crap out of you.
It was very much kind of a disobedience thing in a way.
Yeah, and that's how it went. And then the next time I saw him was a year later, and it was, in an entirely different setting. It was like, hey, look, I'm, let me show you that I'm real. You doubt me. You don't need to doubt me. Let me show you that I can do this for you. And technically, I mean, something good happened the very next morning. That maybe shouldn't have. I don't know. Or at least I connected the two. Whether it's true or not, I connected the two.
Yeah. Well, no, I think it's perfectly reasonable to question that, at the very least, of like, I feel like I should not have done as well on this particular task as I ended up doing. It feels miraculous in that sense.
Yeah.
So, I mean, was it? I mean, so many of these things are like a matter of faith. It's like, what is it? Some people say if you, you pray for a sign, you'll get one. If you're looking for one, that bird landed on the window. There must be a sign.
Yeah.
Maybe it is. If you believe it is, sure, it is a sign. It's really hard to differentiate that out. Yeah, this is a good one. This is like, I'm not sure where to go with it.
For what it's worth, I mean, that's one of the reasons I manifested it in my book, because it was so relatable, and the main villain and Damus, the main character, have this struggle, and I cast him as my villain, and I cast kind of me as Damus. Yeah, but for me in real life with a dream, I don't know. I mean, it was so specific. To this day, I remember the number. I'll never forget it. You know what I mean? And I've never told anybody. I've never written it down. No one's ever going to know. It's going to go to the grave with me. And the creepy idea of going to pray over someone's grave that I didn't know, but I didn't really like. I knew what cemetery he wanted me to go to, and I found her. And I didn't. But I could have easily walked by it 200-300 times.
Yeah,
200, and just seen it. And in my dream, it came back to me. Like that, I can take as just coincidental. Like my mind created that, and I saw it, and maybe I noticed it, and that was fine. But to ask me to do that was out of the blue. There was no family connection at all. Mm-hmm. And the only thing I could think of is that I knew that I was going to walk through that to play baseball, or to play, I was going to the field to play football or whatever. So like I knew I knew that was there, but like the asking to do things, and none of them were like pick up a knife and kill somebody. I'm not hearing
Yeah.
voices, but it was like call this because it's your destiny awaits you kind of thing. But when he did it, it was like I don't want to call that number. I'm so afraid of that number. And then pray over this grave. Like, why would anybody ask anybody to pray over it? Like, it didn't make any sense. It was so nonsensical to me. And then it's like, well, if I do that, what's going to happen next? What is he going to ask me next to do? And I had a chance to do it, and I saw it. And when you see it in real life, it freaks you out. And then I didn't run away, but trust me, there's a lot of teary eyes on that walk. That was not a fun walk.
Have you, in this modern day and age, Googled the number to see what it might be connected to? Or you won't look into it at all? Okay.
Nope.
Fair enough.
Nope.
I mean, this is my own selfish fascination. I want to call the number.
I know you do.
I do.
I know you do.
No, it's a mystery. I want to solve it.
Yeah. I know the number. It's a local number here to me. And it was before they extended all the area codes, and it was a number that I could have easily called. And I've had friends, I've had family, I had my wife, I've had my wife's friends try to finagle it, and I can't do it. I can't do it. And if Googling it is just as bad as calling it in my head, and I know that's probably wrong.
You'll find,
but then I'll know something about it, and I don't want to.
Discovery process, yeah.
And I don't think I want to know.
Fair enough.
I just let it go.
Yeah. Well, and then and you can tell me if this is barking up the wrong tree, and it may be completely different, but an interesting anecdote. Sometimes there are folks with delusional disorders, schizophrenia and stuff, and they will have voices. And you say you don't. I take you at your word, of course. They will have voices that say, "Do little stuff, and then do this, and then do that." And the more they kind of obey, the more they get asked to do. And some of it's silly, and some of it might be dangerous. You never know. And they get afflicted by the voice being angry with them if they don't follow through with some of the demands. That is stuff I'd encountered from my experience. But just to ask you directly, I guess, no experience of hallucinations, no schizophrenic background or diagnosis yourself?
No, I have obsessive compulsive disorder, but a lot of people in my family have it. That's diagnosed.
Sure.
I don't take pills for it or anything treated. I've just treated it through learning how to deal with it, where my brother and my mother take pills to kind of control it.
Gotcha,
and things like that. But that's probably the closest thing. And that's not, in my head, it's not even really a disorder as much as it is a kind of a condition you just learn to live with.
Sure. And there's different levels of it too. There are folks who can absolutely go, I have these urges I have to manage. They're just going to be there. They're annoying. But there are some folks who are like, I can't function. I need help. Therefore, medication makes sense for them. So there's a lot of different ways to manage.
And that's my brother and my mom. I mean, I've got a little touch of it. They take it and it helps them. But for me, I've always been able to kind of control it and use it as a challenge kind of thing. Like I look at it as, all right, well, if I got this, then if it's going to force me to be a perfectionist, then I'm going to be a perfectionist, and like work it out that way. And it's just, you try to make a weakness a strength kind of thing.
Yeah, no, exactly too. With me, with the autism things, like it's because I've got this associative power that usually doesn't fail me as bad as it is during this experience. This one's really throwing me for a loop. I love it though. I love this. It's someone interviewed me a while back and they said, well, what's one of your favorite episodes? And I said it was probably episode 19 where I completely fell on my face. I couldn't offer the guy anything that made sense. And that one stood out to me like there's something I need to learn there because I couldn't make sense of it. So that gives me a direction to go. But just the more I talk to you and I mean, we've got around it, well, maybe get this OCD thing going on. There is something interesting connection wise in terms of being spoken to by someone who's giving you directions and expecting you to obey. And this, the idea of our innate compulsions to perform rituals or be exacting and precise and perfectionist. I don't know if you've ever thought of it in that context or if you have and just it never made sense.
I haven't. I don't know where I would go with that. Like,
were you discovering a tendency towards perfectionism as a teenager?
Yeah, maybe that's fair.
And I don't want to say we got it, that's it, but that's one thing this is how I kind of get us closer to maybe something that might make sense.
Well, I didn't understand what it was. It was not diagnosed. It wasn't even misdiagnosed. I didn't understand what it was when I was younger. When I would bump something, I'd have to go back and bump it in the same exact way and have the same feeling before I could pass the place I was going.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
There were rituals that I would do, like at night before I go to bed. It was the same stuff over and over and over again. And I still do some of them. Like when I have a to-do list, if I scratch off too many things off my to-do list, I have to rewrite the list. I count steps. I brush my teeth 4 times a day. There are things that I do that I know, like my wife teases me about because she knows she can, but I have my rituals, and then when I don't do them, they throw me off. That's for sure. And when we were young, there was no OCD. It was like you're just being strange, or he's just a kid, right? And then my grandmother was always kind of she had become a shut-in, and she had her own rituals, and then my mother got them, and my brother has them, and it's the same thing. I could see it, and I feel for them because I know what it is that they're going through. But I don't have it at their level, so I can't identify with it as well. Yeah. But I have the same kind of rituals. I set my plate, like this thing is set up. Like if this were a dinner plate, I would have everything the way it has to be with me.
Yeah.
So it's a little weird that way, but that's when I would have discovered that it was when I had learned that it was an actual condition that could be diagnosed as opposed to me just being weird.
Fair enough. There is I don't know. What I'm trying to do is tell stories in my head of like, how would this thing express itself if that was it? And it could feel like something scary and controlling, and that you can't understand very well. So you've got this limited ability to see the landscape you're in, and you come across why walking on the lake. I don't know, and why tell you it's an angel, guardian angel specifically. There's a way to make sense of that if we go down that road and apply kind of that lens to it, which change lenses. But you mentioned the idea of making a liability a strength. There might have been some conceptualization in your mind of that time of like, well, if I've got this thing that's going to tell me what to do, maybe it's going to turn out to be a good thing for me. Maybe it is actually a part of me that if I kind of work with it, the good things will happen instead of bad. But it didn't feel that way. And I can imagine being like, yeah, that's one way to look at it, but it doesn't feel like that. Maybe it is, but I don't like it.
No, it's really logical, but and maybe it was like the teenager in you that's just defiant. Like I just didn't want to listen to it. And it didn't, if it were kind, if it had been appealing, if it had been anything except for you have no choice. It was just so, like I said before, it's antithetical. It was, I'm your guardian angel. Well, then aren't you on my team? Like, why am I just taking, like, why
don't I feel like this is, that you really are here to help me? I should feel like you're here to help me.
It felt like whatever you were telling me to do was not going to work out well. And I just never did them. And then I got punished for it. And then I got, the carrot waved in front of me to see if I would do it and bite into it. And then I just after the graveyard thing, I stopped. That was the last visitation. That was it. He went away.
I would say more than anything, if there was no connection with real life stuff, if you didn't have, let's say if you had called the number and it turned out it does this number does not exist. Fantastic. That would tell us something. And just the idea of, it's possible subconsciously you knew the name on the grave because you walked past it, never registered. You were able to pull it up in your dream because we have perfect memory in our dreams, except when they're complete fantasy. And there's a lot of explainable things that we could dismiss as coincidence. We could, but it's the idea that there seems to be some crossover that hesitates me, or that gives me hesitation in terms of saying we should give this a purely psychological understanding. I hesitate to say it is necessarily purely psychological. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
Yeah. So that's where I'm stuck with. I'm like, well, where do I go with that? I can just say, great story. That's the episode. Thanks for listening. But I always want to give people more. I want to say something about it.
Oh no, look, it's as confusing to you as it is to me, and this is your
Yeah,
gig, and so part of me is justified knowing that I'm not the only one here that has a hard time interpreting what this meant. I'm just glad I don't have them anymore,
for sure.
and
Yeah.
it's do I regret not calling the number? No. Do I want to know what's behind the number? Maybe,
Yes
but
and
I'm
no.
not gonna. I'm not gonna do it.
Not enough to
I'm
do
just
it.
not gonna do
Yeah.
it. Not enough to
Yeah,
do it.
for
So,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
so and good.
yeah. Well, I was going to say, if there were not these connections back to the real world that seem to be like, that's weird, I would lean in maybe more to the, oh, okay, maybe this was the understanding of the burgeoning, dealing with the kind of mental health issue of a type and how you're going to have to incorporate that into your life. Like, okay, this is part of me. It's like, what is it? I prefer not to leave the house. I'm not agoraphobic. Like, I get anxiety. I do, and it's managed. But uh, there's a level of it where you cannot leave the house. Like you go to step a foot outside the front door, and you will not put your foot won't leave the front porch. It just, you can't make, and you just turn around and go back in. It's like someone who tells afraid of snakes, and they're like, look, just let it bite your hand, it's not even gonna hurt, and you're like, are you nuts? That It's that level of absolute terror. But part of me, it's is not that agoraphobic side, it's more of the I prefer isolation side. I'm happy to talk to you, and then we stop talking and I go do other things, and I don't see anyone for a week except my wife, and but we're both actually kind of loners as well. We do our own thing. I barely see each other during the day, and we're both happy with that, um so I avoid social situations. So what I've had to do is acknowledge this is how I am, and I could say force myself to change, but why? Is there a reason to do that? Is this disruptive of my life enough that it's like when people say there's a difference between drinking and being a drunk. People drink alcohol from time to time. It's a matter of problematic degree. You get to a certain tipping point and you're like, this is causing more problems than I would like to live with in my life. And you're like, maybe I'm
Right.
getting into alcoholism. So that's kind of where I'm looking at with this thing too, is it depends on how strongly we could connect all of these imagery with that one idea. And I don't know that we can. And I don't know that anything else kind of suggests itself to you as a reason for this, and why the gap. And, um, there doesn't seem to be a triggering event in your life that really resonates as a cause. Like if someone said, oh, yeah, that was the year my parents split up and I had to move to a new city. Well, let's look at that. But this, nothing seems to be coming to mind. And if you look at it
No,
as
we had.
sequence of dreams, any commonality of triggering events in your life of confronting similar situations that might have brought the dream back?
Well, I mean, technically they started in late high school,
Came back early college?
and then ended. Yeah, then there was a gap in early college, first year, second year, and then that's when they really kind of stopped. So like I had a couple after that. No, it went beyond college,
Any
but it
details on
wasn't.
those in terms of further enticement or further condemnation from the being?
No, I mean those dreams happened in the middle. So like I
Okay.
got the fight dream happened. That was the third dream. The fourth dream was waited until I was at college, and then it was the enticement dream. And then the two other dreams after that was the one where he was telling me that he had done something for me, and I should be proud, and then follow him. And then the last one was basically him telling me if I don't do this, he's not coming back, and he never came back. And that was
Gotcha.
the end of it. And so that was it. And it wasn't, but it was, I guess in there were inflection points where you're getting a job, you're graduating college, you're graduating high school. Maybe there's a girl problem in there or two. Family things happen. I honestly don't. I didn't track it. I just knew that
Yeah.
it was different than other dreams in the sense that it was so believable that it had happened. It's almost like a memory as opposed to a dream. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing
Yeah.
too. I mean, a lot of dreams, even if they feel extremely realistic, they don't often, this whole realm of continuing dreams featuring the same character coming back, uh, Very, very confusing to me in general. Definitely something maybe I got a whole book in that someday. I'll talk to enough people and I'll be like, okay, I got it. Here's this new phenomenon no one's talking about.
I'm that case study.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, for what that's worth. Yeah.
But yeah, and there doesn't seem to be a consistent triggering event, because a lot of times when people get recurring dreams, we start looking at, the reason we look at one at a time is, let's look at this one and see if we can link it to something that happened. Like, oh, I was starting a new job, or oh, I got into a new relationship, or oh, I had to make an important financial decision. And then they start going, that happened the last time I had this dream. Wait a minute, that happened when I opened that birthday gift from grandma and she died a year later. And this is all related to money and how I make my decision-making process about what's valuable to me. We start getting that kind of narrative with it. None of that is going here, like with inciting events that kind of line up to bringing the iconography back. This seems
the only treatment for me was writing about it. As weird as that sounds, like I just admitted it in a fantasy book. You know what I mean? It's almost like it's the only way I can get it off my chest.
Evil character come to the protagonist in dreams, or
first chapter.
Gotcha.
First chapter.
Very cool.
It starts out with him in the first chapter, and of course, Damus is away at school, and he's learning how to control this prophetic vision that he has, and he gets his visions in the form of oniromancy, which is he sees the future in dreams.
Oh yeah.
So for me, I use that oniromancy that a prophet would have, like a Nostradamus or an Edgar Casey, right?
Sure.
And then, I threw in there that he sees this big bad guy coming closer and closer and closer to him until they fight, right? And it was my version of kind of relaunching the dream in a fantasy series.
Yeah.
Just weird, but in a weird kind of way, it was therapeutic too. Like I talked about it a couple of times.
Now, if we look at it, if we look at it from that angle, what if, so let's tell a story about the dream. What if this was the process, and he was your guardian angel, and this was the process he decided was necessary to get you to be the author he knew you were going to be. He had to scare the hell out of you. He had to give you a phone number you were never going to call. He had to beat you up. He had to come back in school. That's a story. That's a story. I don't know. Now if we go fully 100% supernatural on it and say, oh my goodness, maybe he was looking, maybe it was, or this was other supernatural forces that were like, look, I'm your, I'm your guardian angel. Why don't you just do what I say? I don't know if we go, like I said, that lovingly spooky woo place. So there's a lot of possible explanations. I don't know what to do with prophetic dreams either. I talked to a gal and we set the prophetic possibility aside. I said, I don't know what to do with that. Sorry, but let's look at your life. And, but she had a dream where it was just, 20 episodes ago, where she's like, I dreamed we were going to a concert and we would be sitting in this row and I could see this on the stage. And then out of the blue the next day, my neighbor says, I got tickets to a concert. You want to go? I went. We sat in the row. I saw the thing and I'm like, whoa, entirely possible. There's 2,000 years of history of people having these type of experiences. I got a friend who lives, half a mile away. He says he has had a dream and a week later, exactly everything as in the dream, in order, precisely as it happened. I'm like, I don't know what to do with that either.
Yeah. It's almost deja vu, like everybody gets that every now and then, where it's like, I know I've done that. And when it happens, you're like, shit, I lived this. I know this has happened before, but
that's been a common explanation for deja vu, is the link to I'm recognizing this because I saw it in a dream. That's one experience people have. There's the scientific theory where it's just a kind of the brain circuit, physical circuit that forms the coherent thought fires twice in a row accidentally. It just gets triggered, and you have that double feeling. That's
or the Matrix, right?
The Matrix, that they just reset the code. Yes. I love those the fantastic explanations too. But I'm glad that you got a kick out of my theory that at least maybe this was because we never know if we accept the possibility of the supernatural. And
that's the best one I've heard so far.
I mean,
it's literally the best one I've heard so far.
Right?
Most people think you're a kid and whatever, and they dismiss it, or you had a nightmare, let it go. You're an adult now, let it go. And meanwhile, it's like you can't let it go. Like I let it. I couldn't let it go enough that I wrote a story about it.
And
like
I
that,
think
it's
that's probably a very great way to perform self-therapy in a way, is to take these things and make a kind of narrative sense out of them. And the lingering impression you had from these experiences was this was not a good dude. So let's put him in the story as the bad guy. And
he's the
let's,
bad guy.
yeah. And I think, well, what do they say? Writers write what they know. So you kind of give life to fictionalized versions of experiences or things. Like, you can't write about something you can't conceptualize, and so it's got to be something that exists in your world and something this powerful to drive you to that. I like the idea of the guardian angel going, he's gonna think I'm an asshole. I have to act like an asshole. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna kick your ass a little bit, and I'm gonna threaten you, and then I'm gonna go away, and you're gonna do what you need to do.
Well, it's true.
We can hope
true.
it's
Might be the case.
we can hope it's a benevolent force. I would like to believe that.
One would hope.
For sure.
Well, my dark fantasy, I'm not sure that it is.
Yeah, that's another thing too. Of like, I think a lot of that type of stuff happens to us just in life. Is like, if we pay attention and we're angling to achieve an understanding, we can look back at some of the experiences we've had and say, I wouldn't be where I am right now if that didn't happen to me. I'd be a different person, but what I'm doing now, and then you can see I touched this person's life, or I'm doing this good in the world, and that kind of came out of that trauma that happened a long time ago. I wouldn't be, the most personal and specific thing, like, if I wasn't kind of a bit of an ass-me jerk in high school and like trouble with relationships and had that complicated side of things, and I didn't get as bullied as I was at the time, which is horrible, and I don't encourage it and I don't condone it, and I'm not saying I'm happy it happened, but it gave me a real dedication to protecting people and being good to people. It's like, I've experienced what it's like to be treated poorly. I choose not to do that to other people, and not only that, but to stand up for people that have that happen to them and say, don't do that. That's not fair. That's not. I got a strong a sense of justice. Somehow, what was it, like Captain America from the comic book says, sometimes you plant your feet by the side of the river like the tree of justice, and you say, I'm not moving, you move. I get that kind of thing. I'm like, if I hadn't gone that path that took me here, I wouldn't be that guy. So we can think of your story that way.
Well, thank you, sir. And I know that that I gotta jump. I've got a 7 o'clock on my side of the pond. So thank you very much for doing this. I really do appreciate the opportunity, and I'm glad I was able to stump you a little bit. Yeah. And I'd love to, when you get a chance to sleep on this, no pun intended, I hope that something will come up. You come up and ping me, because I'm interested. I need to know what you think, and I know I was coming out of the blue with this one. I knew I was going to give you a difficult one. So I hope I made the show interesting, and I appreciate the opportunity to come and share that.
Watch the wizard fail. I'm not ashamed. Not ashamed of it.
Didn't fail.
As long, if it was entertaining, I met that purpose. I'll call it good. Wrapping things up, I'll say once again, thanks to our friend Joe, J.V. Hilliard. You can find him at jvhilliard.com. Links in the description below, and at J.V. Hilliard Books across multiple social medias. Author of epic fantasy novels and the alteredrealitymag.com with speculative fiction and poetry. And my housekeeping, would you please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. Always need more volunteer dreamers. 15 books of historical dream literature available on Amazon. T-shirt, coffee mug, you know the drill. And once again, Joe, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Thanks for the time.
Good deal. And everybody, thanks for watching.